All right, good. For those who tried to get into the class today and did not succeed because they didn't have their what is it, code number or something. So tomorrow we'll change it, God willing. I hope I'll change it. We thought we didn't want people to wait in the waiting room, which we did succeed in doing, but people who don't have the proper code or whatever to get in, something like that, so they can't get in all. They can't even get into the waiting room. So okay. Story. Chassidic story. Ready? Here we go. Amazing, amazing Chassidic story. Once there was a man, came to the Baal Shem Tov, a rich man, tremendously, tremendously rich man, had made money from lumber. He owned, huge forests, and they would cut down the trees. He had workers, and then he would put them in the river in the wintertime, put them in the river and tie them all up together and put a stamp. And then when the summer came, they would float down the river, and he had these big sawmills, whatever is, and they would make boards and furniture and everything. A man made a fortune, but he didn't have any children. So he went to the Baal Shem Tov. It was a 3-day journey, and he made it to the Baal Shem Tov, and in Mizibuz, and said he doesn't have any children. So the Baal Shem Tov said, well, there are 3 gates of success in heaven. There's what's called Bani Chaya Umazoni, children, health, and livelihood. And you have been determined in heaven that you only get 2 of them. And you did. You have health and you have riches, but you don't have children. If you want to have children, you have to relinquish one of the other 2. Either give up health or give up riches. So the Baal Shem Tov said, I'm sure you won't want to give up your health, because then who's going to bring up the child? But if you're willing to give up your riches, then you'll have children. So he said, I'm willing. So the Baal Shem Tov said, no, go back home and ask your wife. He said, no, I don't have to go back. My wife agreed. She said, anything, just that we should have children. So the Baal Shem Tov said, okay, that's the way it's going to be. So he goes back home. It's a 3-day journey. When he's halfway there, he stops off at an inn, whatever that is, and he sits down and hears 2 people talking. One is saying, did you hear about that Groisboich? Right before I left the city where he lives, I live in the city, just before I left, there was a tremendous tragedy that happened though. He had all of his logs, millions of dollars worth of logs on the river, and in the winter, and suddenly it was a hot day, and the river, incredible, and the river melted. All the ice melted. It was like 2 months before the summer is supposed to begin. It all melted, and before he had a chance to tie his logs together and put his stamp on it, and he lost all the money, lost all of his logs. Fortune. So this guy here, this is this Grace Boy. I'm just making up his name. This is this rabbi. He lost all of his logs. He realizes that the blessing of the Baal Shem Tov started to take place. So he stands up and he starts dancing from joy. And these 2 people, they said, wow, how could he dance? He heard about the misfortune of another person. He's dancing, an evil person. So he goes home. The next day is like a half a day away from home. And he stops off in another place and he hears 2 more people. He says, did you hear about that Grace Boy? That guy is a couple of days ago, his logs all got lost. And then his factory burned down. He had a big factory of a carpentry factory, and it burned down, lost everything. He starts dancing, stands up and starts dancing. And the people say, what an evil guy. Oh, terrible. I heard the story, by the way, from Rabbi Mendel Futavas. I heard the story from Rabbi Mendel Futavas. Why? Because the beginning of the story about the 3 gates is written in a book called Kuntres Umayan. So he explained, okay, so so he gets home. I'm embellishing the story a little bit, but not in the main details. So this fellow comes home, and his wife is standing in the doorway, wringing her hands with this worried look on her face. And he comes home and she says, listen, I have not some good news. He said, I know. He said, I lost all the logs and the factory burned down. She said, Yes, that's right. That's amazing. I'm so happy. So she thought to herself, wait, we lost all our money. Now my husband lost his mind. He said, no, I was by the Baal Shem Tov, and he said that I'm going to lose all of our money, but we're going to have children. And she starts dancing as well. Sure enough, all the creditors come and they take his house away from him, and he's got no choice. He has to. He goes down by the train yard, and he finds a couple big freight boxes in the train yard or the shipyard, whatever. He finds his two boxes, and he and his wife live in one of these boxes. And sure enough, a couple of months later, she becomes pregnant, gives birth to a son. And the next year, a girl, and the next year, a son. After 10 years, they have 10 children. And every time they have a child, they just push in a couple more crates next to each other. And he finds some way to like cover over the roof. And that's where they live, in these shopping crates. And they've got 10 children. So he hears this Groisboich, that he's lost all of his money, but he has the children. He hears the Baal Shem Tov is going to come to his town. So he's very, very happy. Meanwhile, how does he make a living? He collects money in the streets. He collects money. People have mercy on him. They give him a couple pennies. They give him a couple. So here's the Baal Shem Tov is coming. So he wants to see just the Baal Shem Tov's face. It's his idea. He figures he'll creep into this shul. He'll put like a hat over his face, something like that. And he'll creep into the back of the synagogue where no one will see him. And he'll just take a little peek at the Baal Shem Tov's face for just a second, because it'll give him tremendous joy and happiness. Anyway, he does it. And as soon as he peeks at the Baal Shem Tov calls out his name and says, Groisbach, and they push him forward. And he's saying, how are things? He says, oh, thank God, everything is wonderful. So he said, everything is wonderful. Would you like anything? No, I don't want anything. The Baal Shem Tov, listen, I know you have 10 children, and the blessing is a blessing, and you don't have to worry. No one's going to take the children away from you. Is there anything you would like to request? So he said, well, to tell you the truth, it's a little bit hard to feed the kids, to the livelihood. We live in this old shack. So the Baal Shem Tov said, I'll tell you why. Because you collect, how do you make your money? He says, I collect money. So, well, you're collecting money here. Everybody knows you already. They don't give you so much. You go to the city of Minsk. And the city of Minsk, go to the big synagogue there. And there, you'll meet people, and then you can start collecting money there. I said, good. What am I going to do? My wife, when I'm gone, she's good. So the Baal Shem Tov gives him some money. Says, give this to your wife. It'll last her until you come back, and everything will be okay. Good. So that's what he does. He goes to Minsk. He gets there like on Friday, and he goes to the bathhouse, washes himself up, sits where the poor people sit in the synagogue, and the rich people come and ask people to go home with them. So sure enough, this Groisboich is sitting there, and a rich man comes up to him and says, do you have a place to eat? No. So I see you're new here. Yes. And they walk home, and he goes to his house, to this the rich guy's house, and it's like a palace. It's just beautiful. It's got beautiful rugs and tapestries and pictures on the walls. And this Groisboich, he remembers, how he used to have, his house used to be like that. His house used to be also very beautiful, and it makes him a little bit sad. But thank God, he's doing what the Baal Shem Tov said. And here he's meeting this rich person, and maybe he'll get a little donation from him after. Anyway, so they have the meal, and this Groisboich tries to sort of make things happy a little bit and sing songs, but the rich man, he's sort of not having any part of it. He's very, very somber and and they're sitting there, him and his wife, and there's some lady comes in and serves them once in a while. But after they finish the whole meal, so this Groisboich says to I made up the name Groisboich just to listen. So he says to this rich man, he says, listen, I really thank you for the meal. It was just so wonderful. It was so beautiful. So, but I noticed that you're very sad. So the rich man looks at him like, who are you? I'm inviting you for, what are you? You'll be a psychiatrist. He's just about to say, listen, do me a favor and just, he said, listen, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I'm probably, just some poor. Believe me, I once had money like you have, maybe even more. I once used to be rich, but it doesn't make any difference. I'm happy. I'm a happy person, whatever I've got. But tell me why I don't understand. Why is something wrong? I said, well, okay, I'll tell you. I got nothing to lose. He said, I'll tell you. He said, you see that girl that came in and was serving us? He says, that's my daughter. She's already 30 years old, and we can't find a shidduch for her. We want her to get married, and we can't. She was engaged to be married about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, and they took the groom. He got taken into the army. Then she got engaged to somebody else, and he went crazy. Then he got engaged to a third person, and the guy died suddenly. So everybody figures that she's cursed. No one wants to get married to her. So we don't know what to do. So the Groisboy says, listen, my friend, I once had a problem, a big problem. And I went to the Baal Shem Tov, and he solved the problem. Let's go to the Baal Shem Tov. He says, where's this Baal Shem Tov? He says, not so far away. And maybe it wasn't the city, Minsk. I'm not so big in geography. Maybe it was Vitebsk. I don't know. Anyway, he says, let's go to the Baal Shem Tov, and we'll. So he says, okay, I'll do it. So sure enough, Sunday, early in the morning, they both prayed, and they got in this guy's carriage, a beautiful, fancy carriage, and they drove to the Baal Shem Tov. They get to the Baal Shem Tov, and the poor person went to this, and Groisboy says to the Baal Shem Tov, here is this man, he has a problem, can you talk to him? So Baal Shem Tov says, yes, please stand outside. He sends Groisboy out. He says to the rich man, he says, listen, your daughter's not married, right? He said, no. He said, listen, you're going to go back home. And when you get back home, your wife is already going to have news that your daughter is engaged, is about to be engaged. And if it works out and there's a wedding, I want you to give shadchanut money to this Groisboy, matchmaking money. If my daughter gets married, I will certainly reward him like a king. Baal Shem Tov said, okay, remember. And so he said, all right, good. So they drive back home. It's also a 3-day drive, who knows, whatever. They drive back, and and this rich man, his wife is standing in the door with the opposite of what Groisboy's wife was standing. She was standing there worried. Remember, she's standing with a smile from one ear to the other. He says, what happened? He said, you won't believe it. She said, yesterday, the train came, right? The train arrived, and who arrived on the train? the first groom, the first shidduch, the first man that my daughter was engaged to, that was taken into the army. Suddenly they gave him an honorable discharge, and they sent him, and he came back, and he's got a beard, and he has tzitzis, and I sent him to the rabbi to see if he's normal or not. He said the first thing he asked when he came here, got off the train, is our daughter married or not? So he went to go to the Rav, and you'll see, he goes to the Rav, he meets the boy, a nice looking fellow, nice to shake his hand. They talk for a while. The rabbi says, listen, I asked him questions. He's genuinely, how he held on in the army is what, and all he does, he wants to know if your daughter is marriageable. So sure enough, they meet, and they decide to make a wedding. Amazing. And in a month's time, amazing wedding. The rich man invites all of the people, the non-Jews, the Jews, everyone is invited to the meal. They make it outside with a big band. And the rich man is going around, and he's pouring drinks for everybody and saying thank you. And right before the wedding ceremony, and suddenly the Baal Shem Tov was there. He said, oh, Baal Shem Tov, thank you. I'm so grateful. You don't know what you've done. You brought joy into my life. You've done. The Baal Shem Tov said, yeah, okay, good. Did you give matchmaking money to that other fellow, to Groisboy? He said, I did. I gave him 1,000 rubles. 1,000 rubles is, let's say, I don't know, like $100,000 today or something. I gave him 1,000 rubles. The Baal Shem Tov said, 1,000 rubles? He says, yeah. Mm-hmm. He said, not enough. He said, really, not enough. I said, okay, good. I guess I was thinking a little bit small. 2,000. I'll give him 2,000 rubles. The Baal Shem Tov said, no, that's also not enough. He said, that's not enough. He opens up his collar. He says, okay, I'll give him 10,000 rubles. The Baal Shem Tov said, listen, I see you don't exactly understand. Tell me, were you always religious? Were you always rich? Were you always rich, or did you become rich? Du bist a Gavorner or a Gaborner? Gaborner means, were you born rich, or did you become rich? So he said, meanwhile, all this noise is going on around him and the band is playing and everything and this. And he's just him and the Baal Shem Tov. They're like in this little sort of, bubble together. He said, well, really, the fact is I was not always rich. I became rich. How did you become rich? He said, well, the fact is I used to be really, really poor. I used to collect money. And, any work that I started to do, I just failed at. So I just used to collect money for me and my wife and my daughter. And there went like 3 or 4 days and I just didn't collect anything. Nobody gave me anything to do. So I went down to the river just to calm down a little bit. And what did I see in the river? I saw this huge log, a huge log, really good shape. I looked at it, it was sort of washed up, it was stuck on the shore. There was no sign on it, no anything. So I brought a couple of strong people and they dragged it to the lumber yard and they paid me like, 10 rubles for this log. Then the next day I went down, there was 4 logs. And I got more people they dragged. And the next day was 20 logs. And the next day was 30. And nobody disturbed me. They just dragged these logs and I became rich. Then I heard that somebody's, some factory burned down or something, and that I could buy it really cheap. And I went and I saw that all the machinery was sort of workable. So I bought it all, and I bought a couple of engineers and technicians, and we fixed it up. And that's how I became rich. So the Baal Shem Tov said, you should know that everything that you have is, I'm sorry, I skipped one thing. Baal Shem Tov says, and how much do you think you're worth now? I said, I don't know how much I'm worth. I don't know. I said, make a calculation. I said, no, I'd have to bring my accountant. Think. All of a sudden, his mind became really clear. He said, I'm worth, I don't know, about 2 million rubles. The Baal Shem Tov said, give him half. He said, what? He said, give to Groisberg half. I said, 1 million rubles? How could I give him money? He said, you should know that everything you have once belonged to him. He lost all that money in order to have his children. Now you give him half. He'll have his 10 children and he'll be rich. And your daughter just got married and you'll be rich. And that's how Baal Shem Tov arranges the world so that everybody is happy. Have a good day with Mashiach now.